Hey everyone, it's Ryan with The Smart House, and on today's video we're going to do something kind of completely different. We're going to be talking about an application that you can set up to enhance your 3D printer. Now I know if you are a fan of this channel, it may not be something that you typically are into. You may not even have a 3D printer, but if you stay tuned, you might learn something about 3D printers and it may encourage you to go ahead and jump into the hobby. Now I put a poll up a few weeks ago asking if people wanted to see more 3D printing content, and a lot of you said you did, so I hope you like this video. And if you haven't already played with OctoPi or OctoPrint, it gives you an insight of what you can do with your 3D printer and really enhance your 3D printing capabilities. So last month, I picked up the Creality Ender 3 version 2 from Micro Center for $199. Now this was an open box 3D printer and it was about $50 off the normal price. For $200, I figured it was worth a shot and let's go ahead and try it out. Well, if you know me, I jumped into 3D printing with both feet, and now I have got a kitted out 3D printer that I use for all sorts of different things. So a big part of the setup is my OctoPrint install. Now, if you're not familiar with what OctoPrint is, it is an application that runs on a piece of hardware, like a Raspberry Pi, for example, that will monitor and control your 3D printer and allow you to have some advanced functions that isn't available with just the stock printer. Now, this software is compatible with almost every 3D printer on the market, as long as it can be controlled over a USB connection. If you're curious, I have a link down here below, which will take you to the compatibility list for different various 3D printers. So basically, instead of uploading your G-code to an SD card and putting it in the printer, the software streams each G-code command one at a time to the printer, giving you an increased level of control. This also makes it super convenient because you can remotely start prints and monitor them from anywhere in the world. This is especially helpful if you attach a camera to your OctoPrint device and be able to remotely monitor and make really cool time lapses. There's also a whole list of plugins that you can use to enhance your 3D printer and make your 3D prints more reliable. I'll take a look at some of my favorite plugins in an upcoming video. So now that we know what OctoPrint is, let's take a look at what's required to get this set up. All right, so you know me, and almost all of my projects involve the ubiquitous Raspberry Pi. Now, this particular project, you can either use a 3B or you can use a Pi 4. So it's up to you. If you happen to have a 3B laying around, that's completely compatible. I haven't heard of any real issues because it's not a super high-speed, processor-intensive setup, except for maybe the time lapses. They may take a little longer to process, but for overall, I've heard it's pretty much you can use either one. So whatever you happen to have laying around. So in mine, I actually have a Raspberry Pi 4 gig in there right now because that's what I happen to have. And of course, because this is a Raspberry Pi project, you're going to have a compatible power supply and SD card. You can use almost any size SD card you want, but if you're going to be doing time lapses, I'd recommend using a larger SD card so you have more space to store your video time lapses. So of course, for any project that's going to sit out in the open, you want to make sure you have a case for it. Now, you can use any off-the-shelf case that you want to choose, or you can 3D print one that can connect to the actual frame of your 3D printer. Now, I've got links in the blog post to various different 3D prints. For example, my Ender 3. And if you go out on Thingiverse or Things, you can find a number of different Raspberry Pi cases that can interface or connect directly to the frame of your 3D printer. Now, the last required part for this project is a micro USB cable. Now, you probably have a whole drawer full of these somewhere in your house, but you have to make sure that it is a data compatible cable and not just a power cable. Now, I've put together a kit for this project that you'll find links for below. Now, mine has a 1-foot micro USB cable that keeps it short and tidy. I also have a short USB-C cable for my camera. Now for the last piece of hardware, this is an optional component, but it's super helpful, and most people end up putting this on their OctoPrint setup anyway, and that's a camera. Now there's a whole list of compatible cameras that are available for the OctoPrint software and the Raspberry Pi, but most people recommend either using a Logitech web camera or using one of the Raspberry Pi cameras. Whether it's the standard Raspberry Pi camera or the new advanced Raspberry Pi camera that has interchangeable lenses. And you can find a ton of really cool 3D prints to support that camera and place it wherever you happen to need it on your printer. Now, I'm actually using a Wise version 2 camera flashed with the webcam firmware. Back during the pandemic, Wise released a version of their firmware that converts their version 2 cameras into a compatible web camera for your computer. This was at the height of everybody moving to work from home, and there not being a lot of webcams available in the marketplace. They made a very smart decision to release a firmware flash, plug it into a computer, and use it as a web camera. Now, this is directly compatible with a Raspberry Pi and OctoPrint, and I happen to have a spare one laying around, so that's why I used it. It's a little bit of a disadvantage because of the wide angle, but it works fine for my setup. On that reference blog post, I have some information on how to verify that your Raspberry Pi is going to work with the Wise camera if you happen to want to go that way. Now, one more optional accessory that you can put on the 3D printer is LED lighting. Now, on mine, I actually have addressable LED lights, WS2812Bs, that I can use with different color patterns, but you can put any light you want. You can even just put a stick-on dumb light. That way you can see the 3D printer better, and also you get better footage out of your camera and your time lapses. So there are a whole plethora of options, and it all depends on your 3D printer itself. Some of them you power directly off the 3D printer, some of them you externally power. So this is a good add-on if you want to have that enhanced quality for your time lapses, or when you remotely check in on your prints, be able to see it even if it's in a dark room. All right, there you go. That's all the hardware required for this project. Let's go ahead and get the software loaded on the SD card, and I'll show you a cool trick with the Raspberry Pi flasher. All right, so I've got the Raspberry Pi imager loaded up here. In the past, I've used the Etcher software, but this new Raspberry Pi imager is super good now. It allows you to install a variety of different images, and it has a lot of neat features that were adopted from applications like Pi Bakery. So we'll go ahead and jump into it. If you haven't already, there's a link here below on where to download and install it. It's obviously free. Once you get it installed and set up, go ahead and pop your SD card in your computer. All right, so let's open up the Raspberry Pi imager, click Choose OS. And now it has a bunch of options in here for other OSs. Now the Raspberry Pi imager has more than just the standard Raspbian image available in it. You have a lot of other options similar to the Kodi. You can install RetroPie. Home Assistant has a direct installer from here right now, so does Homebridge. But if we go under the other specific purpose OSs, you'll see OctoPi. Now, OctoPi, similar to Home Assistant, or what used to be called HAS.io, is a purpose-built image that you can flash on your Raspberry Pi to have it go ahead and install the prerequisites to run OctoPrint on your Raspberry Pi. Now, this is the recommended way of doing it, except for if you happen to be running this on a different piece of hardware. Say you wanted to use the screen, you wanted to use this for more than one purpose, you can install OctoPrint over the top of an existent Raspbian image. But for the purposes of this video, we're going to go and just flash the purpose-built OctoPi. So we'll go ahead and select OctoPi and the latest version. Choose which storage you want to use. Make sure you're using the correct one. But before we flash the image, I want to show you a real quick trick that I learned. If you hold down Control, Shift, and X on your keyboard, it'll bring up the Advanced Installer menu. This allows you to set up certain options like enabling SSH, adding the host name, and also setting up your Wi-Fi before you flash the image. So we'll go ahead and give it a name, enable SSH, and set a super secure password. And then go ahead and configure our Wi-Fi. Make sure you set your country so that way you get access to the different frequencies of your particular country. And you probably want to go ahead and set up your time zone. That way you make sure that you've got the right time stamp on your server. And then go ahead and hit save, and then we'll click write. And of course, it's going to prompt us. All right, now that that's done, let's go ahead and pop it into our Raspberry Pi, boot it up, and get OctoPrint configured. All right, so let's go ahead and open up a browser and we'll get OctoPi configured. So you can go to octopi.local, or if you set a custom host name, go to that one. Now, if your computer cannot find your OctoPrint instance, go ahead and open up your router or whatever your firewall is that hands out addresses, and look for it in your DHCP log to be able to identify it. It's probably the latest device that jumped on your network, or you use something like a ping scanner or ping sweeper to find the device on your network. We are in the setup wizard, so we'll go ahead and hit next on the first one. If you if this was not your first install, you can actually take a backup file and restore it. We'll go ahead and click next. Now we want to go ahead and give it a name, username and a password, and then click create account. Then we'll click next. Now, this is completely optional, but I go ahead and leave it in the defaults. What this is going to do is this is going to ping out and make sure that it's still connected to the internet. So you can just go ahead and either enable or disable connectivity check, up to you. If you want to enroll in the anonymous usage tracking, you can do that as well. There's also an option to enable what's called plugin blacklisting. So that way, if a plugin becomes malicious and the developers decide to pull the plugin, it will actually, if you have this enabled, it will actually disable it on your printer instance. So it's entirely up to you if this is something that you want as an added safety feature, or you want to risk having a plugin taken away. Enable it or disable it, your choice. And now we come to the important part, which is to set up your printer profile. Now, in my case, this is an Ender 3 V2, which is just a name. And same thing, you can give it a custom name and you can give it a model. Now the key piece is your print, bed, and build volume. Now you can find this by Googling your particular printer or checking the manual. You'll find the recommended build plate size online. So I'll go ahead and go to Google real quick. And Google returned an entry directly on there for me. So mine's 220 by 220 by 250 millimeter. So we'll switch back over to OctoPrint. Now in my case, I have a heated bed on my printer, so I'm gonna leave that checked. And since this is a rectangular printer and not a circular printer, I'm gonna leave that there. Now, depending on how your printer, so when you home your printer, when it goes to check the Z-axis, whether it goes into the center or it goes out to the side and checks it, again, this is something you can look up for your particular printer. I know mine is a lower left for that Z-axis homing. So this would be something that you would probably know from if you use something like Cura or if you use another software slicer package for your printer. This would be information that's available from that. And so that's all set. So we'll go ahead and hit next. Read through the warnings, printers have caught fire. It's not a good idea to print unattended, so I'd avoid doing that. Now that we've got OctoPrint configured, let's go ahead and do a test connection to our printer. So we can do that by clicking connect here. So this is going to automatically find the serial port and baud rate just using tests built into the software. So we'll go ahead and click connect, and there we go. It went ahead and found the location and baud rate for my particular printer. Disconnect it. Go ahead and tick these two boxes so that way it'll automatically connect when the server starts up and it saves the connection settings. Click connection again. Now my particular printer has a flaw in its USB control that gives incorrect temperature information. So OctoPrint already prompted me and said, hey, you need to install this plugin. So if you don't have an Ender 3, you may not have this particular problem, but I'll go ahead and install this plugin just to make sure I don't have this issue. But I'll go into how to install those in a minute. All right, so let's take a quick tour of the OctoPrint software. Now we already saw the connection window up here. Once you're connected to your printer, it will go ahead and auto hide that. You've got your state window here, which tells you the current state of your printer. Whether it's printing, canceling, whatever it is, it'll show up in this particular window, and so it lets you see the status of the printer. It also tells you the status of a print if you happen to be printing something at the time. Then below that is your basic controls. You can print, so you can start a print job, pause it, or go ahead and cancel it, and it will prompt you to confirm cancellation. Below that, we have a list of files. Now this is the file manager for both the SD card that's currently plugged into your printer and also OctoPrint itself. So you can actually store your print files on OctoPrint and remotely start them using the app or the website, or you can load them onto the SD card and print off of there. Now, it's highly recommended to go ahead and load your G-code, load it into OctoPrint instead of the SD card to print, because it's faster that way. So you have options in here. You can download them to your computer. You can move them between the SD card and the OctoPrint. You can delete them, load them from there, or you can go ahead and initiate a print right from here. You can also format the SD card, reload it, and then configure it too. And then if you have any printer notifications, they'll show up here at the bottom. Now, over here are a variety of different options for this front menu here. So the first one is your temperature. This is going to show a temperature graph of your bed, if you have a heated bed, and the tool, the hot end of your printer. So I can, for example, the nice thing here is I can go ahead and preheat up my printer if I know I'm going to print something while I'm slicing it. So I go ahead and click here, and I can say set for PLA and set the bed for PLA, and then click go. And that's, as you see here, this first line indicates the target of the bed and the hot end, and then the darker line indicates what the current temperature is of each of those objects. Right now I'm preheating my bed for a print job. So that's the temperature menu. If you go to the control menu, you'll see it already loaded in my camera. Now this is my Wise V2 camera that I've got plugged in on my printer. If you have a compatible camera, it will go ahead and pre-connect it. You don't need to do any settings or any changes whatsoever. If you are using a not directly compatible one, you may have to go into terminal and change some drivers around or load a custom driver set. But as long as you follow one of the recommended ones like the Logitech or the Raspberry Pi camera, you shouldn't have to worry about any of this. Also under this menu, so that's the current view of your printer, you also have control here. So you can move the print head, you can tell it to home, you can change the Z-axis. This is great when you have a failed job that you can lift the print head up so you can scoop out all of the spaghetti from underneath. You can also test your extruder here, so you can tell it to go ahead and, once it hits temperature, extrude or retract. You can test that. You can change your modifiers of your rates. And this is cool because this is the step rate. So if I wanted to take a very tiny step of 0.1 millimeters, I can click that one. Or if I want to make it a much larger step, I can control that from these buttons down here. You also have the option of turning off the motors if you wanted to make a manual adjustment, or turning the fans on or off. The next tab is the G-code viewer. So if you were, as you're printing something, you would see the current movement of the print head on the bed itself. So this is kind of neat to watch the different layers of your print job moving along. I currently don't have anything printing, but as an example, you can see here, this is what it looks like when it prints a job. Terminal shows you the live G-code being sent to and from the printer and allows you to insert your own code if you happen to want to do that. And then the time lapse, this is the configuration for the time lapse. Now, built into OctoPrint is a time lapse function. Now, this time lapse function is a little bit more basic, but it gets the job done if all you want to do is take a periodic snapshot of your print job so you get those nice fast-forwarded time lapses at the end of a long print job. There is a plugin that will enhance this that I'll show you in a future video that gives you those really cool videos where the print head stays still or it moves the print head out of the way and it looks like it just magically grows. That's a plugin called Octolapse, and we'll go over a setup for that in the next video. So if you wanted to set up a time lapse, you can either set one up for it to be a time, so every so many minutes it's going to take a picture, or whenever the z-axis changes. So when it finishes a layer and moves up to the next layer, you can have it set to do that. Set a minimum interval, the target frame rate of the time lapse, how many seconds after the video you want to be able to have a snapshot of the printed project. And you can also have it take a picture whenever you're doing a Z-hop retraction. So if you click Save Changes, this will apply this for every future print. Well, it'll take a time lapse automatically. You don't have to do any more configuration. Then up at the top here, you'll notice you've got your account, which allows you to change your user settings like passwords or log off, any printer notifications or notifications from OctoPrint about an update. You've got your power options here that allow you to shut down the system, reboot the system, restart just the OctoPrint software, or put it into safe mode if you happen to run into a problem. And finally, we've got the settings menu. Now this is important because this is where you can change all the printer profile information. You can set your different presets. You can set up your features, go into more details about your webcam. You can even set up your webcam to be able to be remotely viewed by going to this URL here. You obviously would have to put in the IP address or octopi.local/webcam and be able to put this in so you can actually view this camera remotely. Adding new users, enabling the API, which this is super important. The API is super important because this is how you allow other applications to access your OctoPrint instance. So if you happen to be wanting to use something like the Spaghetti Detective or one of the mobile apps, you'll need to use the API to configure that. Now, not to worry, I'm going to erase this API key when I'm done here. You also have the new ability to create application keys. The difference between the API and the application key is API gives you global access to everything, basically admin or root level control over your OctoPrint instance. Application keys can be used to reduce that down to just giving them the same permissions as a particular user. So this is the recommended way, and they have said in the new version 2.0, whenever that comes out, they're going to remove the global API keys and go with just this more restrictive, more secure method. Out of all the rest of these, the other important ones here are going to be updates. This will allow you to check for updates for everything, including OctoPrint itself and any of your plugins. Backup and restore, which allows you to take a backup snapshot, which I recommend doing once you've got your OctoPrint set the way you want it to, just in case you have an SD card failure. And also the plugin manager, which this is where we'll be spending a lot of time in the future. This is where you can go in to add additional plugins to augment your current OctoPrint setup. So you do that by clicking the Get More, and this shows you all of the available plugins that are in the store from OctoPrint, or you can set a custom URL or upload the file manually. Now here in a minute, I'll show you some critical plugins that are used to interface with Home Assistant and other things. All right, now that the basic setup has been finished for OctoPi and you've taken a tour of the software, let's get some essential plugins installed. Then we can add it to Home Assistant. So we'll click the wrench icon, go down to Plugin Manager, and Get More. The first plugin we're going to install is the MQTT plugin. Now, Home Assistant does have a direct integration with OctoPi, and it works for some basic stuff, but I find the MQTT one a lot better. You get a lot more extended information, and so I recommend installing it instead of setting up the default integration with Home Assistant. Now, you'll obviously need an MQTT broker, and if you haven't set one up, you can click on this video above where I describe how to set up the MQTT broker as part of another project. The second one we're going to install is the Home Assistant Discovery. Now, again, this modifies the MQTT plugin to be compatible with the Home Assistant Auto Discover function. Makes it much easier to set up. Now, one of the things I do recommend is setting up a smart plug connected to your 3D printer so you can shut it off when it's not in use, saving yourself some energy, and you can monitor the energy usage of your 3D printer. Now, I'm not going to recommend a specific one because you can use anything that has an on-off control. There is a function, another plugin you can install if you wanted to, called PSU Control MQTT. This allows you to control the an MQTT device in Home Assistant, for example, to control it from the front end of OctoPrint. So you can actually use it to turn it on and off, and it will automatically, when receiving a request, turn that on. Now, I'm not going to show you how to configure that because it's so dependent on what you particularly have. There are also other plugins like a Tasmodo MQTT, and there are PSU controls directly for Home Assistant, Tuya, OpenHab, other various systems that you can use to control that particular that power supply unit. So again, select one that works well for you. Now, the last plugin I'll suggest that you install is Octo Everywhere. This is a free, premium supported application that allows you to create a secure tunnel from the internet to your OctoPrint instance. So this allows you to do outside control. So if you happen to be away on your way home, you want to turn on the 3D printer, have it warm up, or go ahead and start a print, you can do that using this application. I'll show you how to set it up here in a second. They do have a premium tier that you can subscribe for that gives you some additional add-ons, but the free tier is functional and allows you to set up one of the recommended mobile apps through the application, and so you can control it from your phone from anywhere in the world. Now, I've got links to all the mobile apps in the blog post. There are quite a few that are both directly compatible with OctoPrint, also ones that are compatible with Octo Everywhere. All right, now that we've got those installed, it's going to prompt us to go ahead and restart to get those set up. So we'll go ahead and restart our OctoPrint. Now, one thing I will note is you cannot modify your plugins while the printer is printing. This obviously makes sense, but it may trip you up. If you want to go in and make a non-essential configuration change, you cannot do that while the printer is printing. If the device is in printing mode, it locks you out of that menu and it will warn you about that. So just be aware. All right, so once it finishes rebooting, the first thing you're going to see pop up on your screen is it's going to take you through the setup for Octo Everywhere. So it's a very quick and easy setup. So we'll go ahead and click complete setup now. It's going to take you out to the Octo Everywhere website, and it's going to have you set up for an account. So I'm going to create a different account for this since it'll be kind of a test one. You can use Google, Facebook, Apple for a login, or you can set it up manually. All right, so we got to give it a name and then click finish setup. So there we go. Now the printer has been set up and we can connect to it and make changes right here from the interface or from one of the mobile apps. They do have a new function for printer notifications that you can set up through Telegram or Discord, but I do this through a different plugin, so it's not that important. So you can see a preview of the webcam on the printer. You can click connect and it will send you into the portal page. So now you see you've got your logon. This is the logon we set up before. Just like if you're going to log into this through a web interface, it just basically creates a secure tunnel that gets you where you need to be. And there we go. Now I'm connected through the Octo Everywhere tunnel. Now, like I did mention, there is a premium tier that gets you some extra features. So there you go. Now that's the essential plugin setup. Now I know I haven't covered the MQTT setup. I'll do that here in the next step and do all of the setup for Home Assistant. So let's go ahead and jump into that. All right, so now that we've got everything set up, let's go ahead and get this added to Home Assistant so we can view it from our Home Assistant instance, make control changes, and also view the web camera all in one. All right, so the first thing we need to do is go ahead and configure our MQTT plugin so that way our OctoPrint instance can go ahead and talk to Home Assistant via MQTT. So to do that, let's click on the wrench again, scroll down to MQTT. So under plugins now, you'll notice some new options in here, one of them being MQTT. So go ahead and put the IP address of your MQTT broker in, and if this is of course running on Home Assistant, then it will be the same IP address as your Home Assistant instance. If you do have username and password configured, go ahead and make sure to check this box and enter the username and password. When you click save, then it's going to attempt to establish a connection. And if you use something like MQTT Explorer, you can verify that everything's working fine. All right, so there we go. Now you can see that it's properly communicating with our Home Assistant instance. However, it's its own topic and not part of the Home Assistant topic, so it won't work for Auto Discover. So let's click back on the wrench icon, scroll down to the Home Assistant Discovery, and make sure that's enabled. So make sure Home Assistant is enabled and you've got the device information on here. And if we were to explore Home Assistant now, we should be able to see new sensors in here for printing. Now, of course, to add that to Home Assistant, all we need to do is click on Configuration, Integrations, and then under our Mosquito Broker, we'll click One Device, and we see OctoPrint. Now that loads all this information into your Home Assistant, which you can actually add with a single click down here at the bottom and add it to wherever you want on your Home Assistant instance. And now you'll see all this information. You can see your target temperature, the current temperature of the beds, enable disable snapshots, cancel the print if it's currently printing, disconnect the printer, check its status, see what the current height of the Z-axis is, do an emergency stop, see what the last event was, pause the print, see how much time is left, which file is printing, how long through the print it is, what its current status of the actual OctoPrint is, print time left, what it's doing, do a shutdown of the system, which this will actually shut down the software itself. And then you get information about what progress it is if you're using a slicer, the temperature of the actual Raspberry Pi, and the target temperature and current temperature of the hot end tool. So all that information is available. It also gives you a snapshot from the camera, which works sometimes as an image, but I like to add the camera in as an actual dedicated camera so I can get a live feed. And the simplest way to do this is to jump back into our OctoPrint instance, click on the wrench again, go to webcam and time lapse, and then grab this URL right here. And if we were to hop up into our browser here and paste that URL in after the either IP address or the name of our OctoPrint printer, we'd be able to see a live stream from the printer. So I'm gonna go ahead and grab that entire URL, hop back over into our Home Assistant. So we wanna go to Visual Studio Code. So you wanna go ahead and open up your configuration.yaml. If you do have a camera.yaml, you add it to that. If you don't, you can add it just into the root of your configuration.yaml. And I do have a snippet of this code as an example in the blog post below. So it's just an MJPEG platform. You give it a name, you give it a still image URL, and it's that same URL we saw before, except for its !action snapshot, because it's just going to give you a snapshot of the image, not an actual stream. And then for the MJPEG URL, same thing, /webcam, action equals stream. This will give you the live feed coming from the actual camera. So we'll go ahead and make sure our indentations look correct, hit save, go to configuration, server, and reload the generic IP cameras and entities. Now, if that doesn't work, obviously you have to do a restart of your Home Assistant instance. So we'll check configuration and go ahead and restart it. So to check everything's working, we click on Developer Tools, go to States, search for camera, we scroll down, and we find OctoPrint Ender 3 V2, click the I, and there we go. There's the live feed from the camera. Now, of course, we want to add this into our Home Assistant dashboard, so we'll go ahead and grab the name, hop back over to our interface, edit dashboard, add card, go by entity, paste that in, and click continue. Add a Levels UI, and there we go. There's a live view of our OctoPrint printer. Now there you go, you got a fully set up OctoPrint instance, you've got a webcam if you wanted to get that installed, and now we've integrated into Home Assistant. So we can now start a print job from anywhere in the world. We can monitor it either using the Octo Everywhere software or using our Home Assistant instance, and be able to do things like cancel our print jobs, or pause them, or even just check in on them. I've added in my live interface, I've added some nice graphs so I can see the current temperature similar to the OctoPrint instance, or be able to track the progress of my print. Now, in an upcoming video, I'll show you some of my favorite plugins and how I configure them to be able to control it using my Telegram messenger and integrating with some other pieces of software, and how I do my power supply control. So stay tuned for that video. That should be coming up in the next couple of weeks. Thanks again for watching this video. And if you happen to be a smart home person, hopefully this interests you. And if you haven't already got into 3D printing, gives you some ideas what you can do with a 3D printer, more than just the basics of being able to print off an SD card. So again, thanks again for joining us on this week's video. I hope you have a great rest of your week and happy printing.